I'm going to turn to the relationship with the Republic. Before I do, though, can I pick up something you mentioned, Alison, earlier? As a new member of this committee, you talked about the unintended consequences of national policy on particular issues of Northern Ireland. To what extent does Northern Ireland see this committee as your conduit into that discussion and making that case?
Probably the honest answer, not as well as we should. And I know when I was over with colleagues at the time of the unpausing of our growth deal, which is just over 12 months ago, the point was made that we, both individually and collectively, should be considering Westminster more than we do. So I think that's a fair comment, and is something that certainly within our own council, I think we'll wish to consider how we best deploy your offer and the availability that you can bring to maybe influence some of those changes.
Is there more we can be doing?
Well, I suppose coming into this session this morning, a thought that I had is right after our session today, if that can be the catalyst, if that can be the sort of kickstart for you guys to very, very firmly know that in terms of the local government sector within Northern Ireland, we have 10 years' experience under our belts on the ground, and please, let's continue the conversation. Let's continue building on today, and I think that would be one of the very best outcomes from our session this morning.
I agree. Well, thank you for attending today. I found the insights hugely helpful. Now, turning to the relationship with the Republic, the economic opportunities and challenges from that relationship, given the sizable differences in labour productivity between the North and the South, what are the costs and benefits of that relationship?
I suppose in terms of the broad ROI piece, a couple of comments that I would make. Obviously, ROI would be more keen on their national development plans, whether that's in agri or whether that's in industrial and so on. So they're more into national development plans than maybe we in the UK generally are, and that's a fair comment for Northern Ireland. So I think that because such plans maybe aren't there, it leaves us at an immediate disadvantage, perhaps, that we don't have the strategic sort of bullet points, right? Blah 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 will mean improvement and so on. So I think that there should be focus on that. The other thing that I would say, and it's maybe a personal view, but I believe that it has some sense, whether it's nimbleness or whether it is ability to think outside the box, or whether it's the ability to maybe push boundaries in terms of what's allowable, or the Republic are generally better at doing that than UKG are and that NI Executive are. So, and I mean, I'm not for one moment referencing anything that is out with the law or out with process, but just there is the nimbleness. It's to think outside of the box. ROI does that better than UKG does.
I think there are clear structural differences between economy in the north and the economy in the south, and there are levers that we have at our fingertips that we could use to enhance that relationship, and also to make it more equitable between the two jurisdictions. But having said that, I think the growth of the economy in the south and the speed at which it has grown has presented, opportunities for companies looking to expand. I think what comes with that then is all the challenges we've already referenced in terms of how we facilitate some of that development, particularly in Antrim, Newtownabbey. Again, putting my hat on, probably the logistical distribution hub for Northern Ireland. Anybody who moves goods about is probably based in our borough, and largely they do that because of the ability to move goods between GB and Northern Ireland, and then from Northern Ireland into the EU through Ireland. And there are definite anecdotal benefits to the style of that relationship. I think what we need to probably do is look at how we can take some of the positive impact that the economy is having in ROI and draw some of that up, particularly in areas where they're at capacity or the growth is so significant that there are opportunities for growth beyond the borders of Ireland, and then how we facilitate that and how we can have a competitive advantage, because in so many ways we're at a disadvantage where it matters in terms of taxation, in terms of benefits through R&D and things like that. But we still retain a very competitive edge in terms of wages and wage growth. We still retain a very competitive edge in terms of our expertise and the skills and the universities and the R&D facilities that we have. We still have the land availability conscious of what Gavin has said, planning, whilst it's challenging in Northern Ireland, is equally challenging in the south. So I think, certainly when we've been talking to investors more recently, and they're considering a facility on the western frontiers of Europe, whether it be in Northern Ireland or in the Republic, it's a competitive process. There's multiple sites involved. You're trying to put your best case forward, and it often comes down to the relationship that you can build, the speed at which you can meet the expectations of the client. And certainly that's some of the benefits we've seen in terms of how we try to do things in Northern Ireland, particularly in Antrim, Newtownabbey, about trying to facilitate that development. So for me, I think the relationship's very strong. I think there are very obvious positive impacts of that cross-border relationship. It's how we continue to build those and strengthen.
And that nimbleness you were talking about, or lack of, that must inhibit taking some of these opportunities.
Yeah, I suppose it does to an extent. I think not to build on what Alison has said, Antrim and Newtownabbey take a slightly different approach in terms of our planning function. We've taken it as a service to a client as opposed to a statutory process that they have to go through, even though that's what it is. And we often encourage very, very early engagement with them, so that we quite often are the number one authority in Northern Ireland, and quite often overperform in terms of our target of 30 weeks for major development. So we've taken a different approach kind of in Antrim Newtownabbey around how we see planning and how it sits alongside economic development. So we have that package. We're very confident in that package in terms of the support we can give anybody coming to look at Northern Ireland as a location for. Don't get me wrong, there are statutory partners that need to support that as well, but we take a slightly different view on it from that perspective. But there's no doubt there are all the other challenges that we've already referenced in the session that make our competing pace slightly more difficult.
And the Dublin-Belfast economic corridor, which is a success, is it more of a success for the south and the north, or is it being leveraged enough by the north?
As to whether it's been leveraged enough, I'm not sure, but I would certainly suggest that it is a success, because I'm even thinking of towns along it, as in Sir Lisburn, Dromore, Banbridge, Newry, and so on. Certainly they would get uplift. And whether that's sort of shoppers coming from sort of ROI to Newry or to the Boulevard and Banbridge or on down to Sir Lisburn and so on. So yes, it has been a success, but yes, you could probably still always do more.
And what do we need to do more?
I think maybe just to add a little bit around the agility and what we need to do more, I suppose, I think it's probably fair to say the Belfast-Dublin economic corridor is still at a relatively early stage of development, and it has not yet maybe had any real weight around policy change or difference. Is much more focused on cooperation, which is obviously a useful first step. Probably a more relevant consideration would actually be the relationship which was originally the North West Gateway Initiative, which was between Donegal and Derry, and is now, I think, maybe enshrined 25, 30 years plus in terms of both economic investment and cross-border cooperation. And certainly both of those places would indicate that there has been very significant benefits by having a formal relationship established. It's allowed them to do joint trade missions, for example, to the United States and elsewhere, joint skills initiatives, and to work in a very practical cross-border way, so using the border, not seeing it rather as an impediment. I think one of the challenges that the Belfast Economic Corridor will have is just its distance. You know, it's fairly lengthy, but also it is probably a very strong player at each end, and it's how you ensure the people in between aren't maybe squeezed out a little. Could I just say one point maybe about agility that I think would be important for us not to overlook? Money greases the wheels greatly, and the economy in the Republic of Ireland has been a success story for a good number of years. I mean, we've recently had the announcement from the Taoiseach of a further 1 billion in shared island initiatives. Many of those will be directly contributing to economic growth, productivity and all other enabling factors. It is very easy to be agile when you have money at your disposal. So I think that what we need to show is that we can put the structures in place that when the money follows, then the decisions can be taken quickly. The other practical issue maybe that I would just highlight in terms of both the proximity, but maybe one of the challenges in the context of the Republic of Ireland is we are across all sectors losing people. So people, be they medics, be they lawyers, accountants, engineers, planners, building control surveyors, people are now routinely choosing to work in the Republic of Ireland as opposed to in Northern Ireland because mainly for financial reasons, and that is including really all across the 11 council areas now. Traditionally would have been something that we would have experienced maybe in very border communities, but now it's happening in Belfast and elsewhere as well. And I think that is a risk, because as soon as we move away from practical cross-border cooperation into almost a threatening partner in inverted commas, I think that can become a concern as to how economic development can be delivered in the future.
Chair, at the risk of a very brief supplementary comment, I would have to reference the fact that East Border region is 50 years old this year, and essentially it takes in 3 councils, Republic of Ireland, 3 councils, Northern Ireland, right the way along the Belfast-Dublin economic corridor, and certainly it has been a driver similar, I suspect, to what was referenced by Alison in terms of the northwest of the island, and I think that groups and organisations such as those, they have to have their place. That it has to be recognised the positive work that they do on a daily basis in terms of cross-border cooperation. Thanks for indulging, Chair, on that one.
Okay. For inclusion, we just reference ICBAN as well, that's all.
Thank you, Chair. It's been great to hear this discussion today.